So here we have an Edinburgh street scene. The first thing I like to do is to work out the eye level, which is about here. So this is the spot level with my eyes directly across the road from when I took this photo. I actually think I was standing on something when I took this, but also the ground is higher where I am. And then I like to look at, pretty much the top perspective line, which is the top of the window pretty much, and the bottom perspective line, which we'll make here. And we can see that in fact, yes, there is a vanishing point actually off our drawing that is on the eye level. And we see that all of these buildings from here to here follow that perspective pattern because they're all in a straight line. The pattern shifts further down the street because the road curves, but this works all very nicely. And so we need to make sure that all the lines here follow this perspective pattern. The other thing to realize is that the street actually doesn't follow the perspective pattern because it does slope down. So it slopes down in two ways. In the top half of the street of the picture, it slopes down at this angle, but after that, it becomes almost following the perspective line. It starts to flatten out. So I always find that particularly tricky to draw. So I'm going to leave that till the end when I've got the buildings to help give me some guidance as to where to put that line. So let's start. Well, I always say this, but it's important to go really slow at the start and to get your perspective lines really accurate in this sort of drawing. This is very sped up. This is about, 6 or 8 times as fast as I took to actually draw it. You can see that I'm using my pen to measure the angle. It's also important to get the foreshortening correct of these 3 sections. You can see there's 3 sections here. And it's also important to get the positioning of these windows correct, again, because they're a template for the rows of windows above and below and for other details as well. So it's important to make sure we really position these first features, elements of architecture, really well. The care that we took with the first row of windows really pays off now as we do the second row of windows, because once we've carefully worked out the perspective lines for the top and bottom of the windows, it's really easy just to follow the window spacing that we've done and the window widths that we've done in that first row. So that's a nice little break, if you like, just being able to do that quickly. Then we come down to the ground level where it's kind of less straightforward. We're not just doing a row of windows. We have new features. We have the shop front to put in. And we also have figures to consider. Now, of course, figures are affected by perspective, and the scale is also really important. If we draw the figure too large, it makes the building look small or it makes the person look like a giant. So it's really important to get that correct. And then placing subsequent figures is also a bit tricky because the ground slopes away. So the perspective isn't as straightforward. So careful observation, as always, is the key. Look back and forth, look back and forth, look back and forth. Look where the top of the head is, look where the bottom of the feet are. Avoid drawing a straight line along the bottom. It's often a really weak area of drawings where the buildings actually touch the ground. There's quite a lot of back and forth and indents and outdents and detail at ground level that we mustn't avoid because it brings a real level of realism to our drawing and accuracy if we do it. And if we try and rush it, it can leave it looking very two-dimensional. All our perspective lines slope up towards eye level now. I decided to draw the gabled windows next along the very top of the roof line of this closest building, and need to pay particular attention here to the perspective, of course. The perspective line becomes more and more extreme, so I need to pay even more attention that I increase the angle enough, or else it'll just flatten out the perspective and I'll lose that visual drama that the perspective gives. The windows are easily enough done because they follow the same alignment of the windows beneath them. And as you can see, I use my trusty pen to get those angles correct. And of course, all the elements that are on the same horizontal line need to follow the same perspective line. So the tips of these largest gable windows, they follow the same perspective alignment pattern that all the other perspective lines follow. And the foreshortening means that the the top of each of these gables is not exactly halfway. It's always a little bit further than halfway away, because the second half, if you like, is compressed. And now I decide I'll start the next building. Now again, it's really important when we go beyond the first building to get those perspective lines correct. Now we're really continuing these rows of windows along. We've already established the perspective lines, so it becomes easier to go along as we can reference off more of the drawing that we've done. There's a bit more detail at ground level here. There's another group of pedestrians. Again, it's important to get the scale correct with people. They're much smaller in absolute terms than those first figures we've drawn, so it's really important that we don't make them too large, or it will throw out the whole sense of distance receding away from us and just be confusing them with the architecture around them. Finish these bits on the top and now continue with another building. Now I actually got quite confused with these windows. I don't know what happened, but my second row of windows here, the perspective is all wrong. I hope you can see that. And look, I pointed out to you because I'm learning too, and it's always a journey and it's easy to make these mistakes. I don't know why, I just really struggled with those. Maybe I was watching the TV too much. This building is the final one in this, if you like, perspective straight line of buildings. And it becomes more straightforward to draw because there's so much to reference it off. So it's just putting those details in, and then there's some more pedestrians outside. Again, being careful with the scale and being careful with the slope of the street. This is where the street starts to flatten out, so I have to pay attention that I get that correct. And now we have some streets, some buildings that we're really just seeing the very edge of, and then the street starts to go directly away from us. So we're not really seeing buildings there at all. I draw this signpost in that's in the middle of our view of the street. I like these foreground objects in shadow. I think they're just a nice point of visual interest. And I shade it with my pen because I've decided by now that I'm not going to apply marker tone to this drawing. I will just do it all with line. So now I'm drawing the buildings on the other side of the street. They're extremely foreshortened, so they're really just a series of vertical lines. And the thing I take care to do is to measure the heights of the various gables and chimneys off what happens on the other side of the street. So I just want to make sure that I get the scale correct for how far away they are. But the further buildings here on the right side are further away than on the left. The final detail now is to put these chimneys along the top of the roofs. Now they align horizontally, so the fronts of the chimneys will have to follow the same perspective rules, and this will be the greatest angled perspective line because it's the line that's furthest away from eye level. So just pop these details in. We also align them vertically with the window, so it's pretty straightforward. And then basically our Edinburgh street scene is finished, and I'm mostly pretty happy with it. Hi, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope that was helpful. When we draw a perspective streetscape, it's even more important that we work at getting those perspective angles really correct, that they increase as they go above the eye level and they decrease as they go below the eye level, because there are simply so many architectural elements in a streetscape, particularly rows of windows, that if the perspective lines aren't correct, the effect is sort of magnified, and it just means there's something not quite right with our drawing. And in fact, with a streetscape, the perspective is usually one of the, if you like, more interesting visual elements that we're wanting to capture. So it's really worth taking real effort with that. And I hope this video was helpful in us all going on to do that. Anyway, the important thing is that we have fun. I had fun. I hope you do too with your drawing. Bye-bye.